This is Perspectivas Latinas, a community service of CAN TV. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. The Chicago Latin Jazz Festival will be taking place this summer and is in its 9th year. The festival celebrates and honors this beautiful genre of music. Our guest, Carlos Flores, is here to tell us more about it. Welcome today.
Thank you.
And, congratulations on having a festival that's been going on for 9 years now.
Yes, it's an initiative that started before the 9 years. It was something that, and it was initiated by the Jazz Institute of Chicago, which actually is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year.
50 years.
Right, they started in 1969, and the Jazz Institute of Chicago, their mission is to actually promote and disseminate information about the whole genre of jazz in Chicago. So they come up with a lot of different programs, educational programs, not only performances, but also work through schools and so forth.
So how did this festival come about, and how did you become such a big part of it?
Well, you know, I think that part of Latin jazz and jazz Latino has always been part of the whole makeup of the Chicago jazz scene. So long before we actually had this concept of the Chicago Latin Jazz Festival, the Jazz Institute of Chicago, and they're the ones that also programmed the Chicago Jazz Festival. They've always included Latin acts, Latin jazz groups. So we came about as part of this program called Jazz City, which actually brought jazz music into different neighborhoods and throughout the city. And we started out with this program called Sonidos Calientes, where we actually went to different parks in collaboration with the Chicago Park District, where we bring in different music to different neighborhoods. So we came up with this concept of actually doing a Latin jazz festival. I mean, it started out where we do one day, and in the last couple of years, we've actually now expanded to 2 days. So it's kind of growing, and people look forward to it.
Okay, so let's take a look at a piece of music right now. Tell us about this group we're gonna watch right now.
Well, the group, I believe, is a group that performed last year.
Right.
And what we did last year is that we actually paid tribute to this Mexican bass player named Victor Venegas. And Victor Venegas was born in Durango, Mexico, and came to Chicago. And I think he went to the military. He actually got into school, music school, you know, became a musician. He also became acquainted with the whole genre of jazz. So he was playing with local jazz musicians. And in the 1950s, he also joined an Afro-Cuban band. I think it was called the Nuevo Ritmo, if I'm not mistaken. And they were playing at a club called, one of the clubs they were playing in is called the Mirador, which is on Roosevelt and Halsted, nearby here. And so Victor performed with this group, and with this Afro-Cuban band, he actually also learned the tumbao, the Cuban tumbao.
Wow.
And so I think that he actually, in the early 1960s, Mongo Santamaria came and recruited him, and Mongo Santamaria put his band together. And he took Victor with him, and after that it was all history, because Victor then he actually performed and recorded with people like Earl Gardner, Cal Jada. He was like the top premier musician in some of the Afro-Cuban music that's out of New York with Celia Cruz and all the top musicians. So, you know, so when I asked the musicians if they knew about Victor Venegas, a lot of them would tell me, yeah, who was he? So we kind of felt that, you know, this would be a great idea to educate the public. So what I did is I actually we commissioned a group of young Mexican-American musicians, jazz musicians, to put together a show that would pay tribute to Victor Venegas. And this is a clip we're going to see from the Tribute to Victor Venegas show.
Great. Oh, that's a great piece. You were telling me that you selected this band and this piece of music to honor the
Victor Venegas.
Victor Venegas.
Right, happens to be, which a lot of people, equate to thinking that most of the musicians that play Afro-Cuban, Afro-Caribbean music are basically Cubans and Puerto Ricans. But nowadays, everybody
Right.
plays, and the Mexican Americans have been playing for a long time. You got
Generations.
yeah, you got generations. You got, especially in the Latin jazz and jazz field, you got people like Poncho Sanchez, who's a tremendous percussionist who played with Cal Jada for many, many years.
So tell me, when is this festival taking place this year, and where, and why? Why do you
Okay,
place
well,
it?
the festival is taking place this year, July 17th and 18th, and basically, we actually have, for the last 9 years, have been actually doing the festival at the same location at the same time because, nowadays we actually bring in bands from the outside. We started doing that about 3 years ago.
What do you mean by that? From the
Bring
outside?
from the outside, instead of using local, we use
Okay.
local players, but we also use renowned musicians. And we started that about 4 years ago when we brought in Chichito Valdez. And it's kind of interesting. Chichito Valdez came and he played with some of the local guys. And he tells me, Flores, I think you're onto something here. So, you keep it up. And so we've actually been able to not only bring in bands from the outside, but also been able to expand the festival from 1 day to 2 days. And basically, when I talk to, last year we brought in this guy named William Cepeda with his Afro Bomba Jazz. The year before that, we brought in Candido, who happens to be 90 years old at the time, and James.
And he's still living?
Yeah, he's still living, still playing. We brought in a flute player by the name of Jan Burnett and also a Cuban pianist by the name of Hilario Duran. They play with Candido on stage. And we also brought in Bobby Sanabria and Cuarteto H. And we had brought in also, a year before that, we brought in a gentleman by the name of Paoli Mejias, who actually came by himself, but he played with the local guys. Paoli now plays with Carlos Santana. He's Carlos Santana's drum player. But when I talk to these guys, I actually, we don't have a lot of money in terms of budget-wise to put this thing together. And a lot of people think, oh, you guys really have the money to put this together. But when I talk to musicians, I actually tell them about the concept of this thing, and I tell musicians, well, you probably get your inspiration, your creative inspiration from the community that you live in, people you grew up with, and that's how you compose your music. But you know what? Unfortunately, a lot of those folks, when you come in to play in a downtown club in Chicago, in a downtown theater, a lot of these people cannot go see you because they either cannot afford it and they don't have accessibility to the venue where you perform. So what we do is that we're bringing the music to the people. And so they like that because then they're able to say, well, yes, because people probably have never heard of a Giovanni Hidalgo, or they have, or they've never seen him play because of the fact that it's not accessible to them.
Right.
And so that's what the festival does. It actually brings music to the people in the Humboldt Park community and surrounding communities.
And so people of all ages, all different backgrounds.
Oh yes, it's a beautiful thing because you got all ages, different nationalities, different ethnic groups, and it's a really wonderful ambience of how the whole thing's set up. Like I said, we started out at one date, and we would do it on Friday night, so like we have 3 bands. But now we actually have gone into a 2-day festival. And not only that, but in the afternoon we have like family activities.
This is Friday and Saturday afternoon?
Friday and Saturday afternoon. So Saturday afternoon we have outings for families, right? So the families can come out, and they'll be exposed to storytelling of African, Caribbean, Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latin storytellers. We have community art organizations that come out and talk about their service, painting the faces of the kids, and we actually also feature cultural groups, music groups made up of young people. Last year we had a marimba group from the Southwest side.
Okay.
We also had a group from the Congo, and these are all afternoon
From the
programs.
Congo?
Yeah, right. There's a group of people here from the Congo that actually play the music from the Congo.
Wow.
And it's interesting because one of the percussionists in the group happens to be Puerto Rican. So it's an interesting. They're all Congo musicians, but they always got to have a Latino in there. I don't know how to get in there, but yeah, those are the kind of things that we do with this festival.
Mm. And so, I mean, it's obviously something that's growing. So obviously, the community is responding, um, and like you said, it's bringing music to the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you say that's where a lot of these musicians found their inspiration in the first place. But I think as a genre, Latin jazz, I don't. At least a lot of people don't. I don't. I'm not very familiar with what you mean by Latin jazz as a genre. Tell us more about it, so we can.
Well, you know, the whole thing, you know, the beginning of this is jazz, right? Jazz is
Right.
really true Americana. It's really, if you want to talk about anything that identifies American culture, it's jazz, because it was born, and it was started here in the United States at the turn of the century, and
By
it started in New Orleans.
New Orleans.
And it started, and it comes out of the African American tradition,
Mm-hmm.
gospel music, blues, ragtime, and there's been, you know, a number of different styles that have developed from the beginning. And you know, at the beginning, you had an individual by the name of Jelly Roll Morton, who is one of the innovators and founders of the whole genre of jazz. And he, you know, he kept making reference to this thing called Spanish tinge. And the Spanish tinge is kind of like the ingredient needed to actually make, you know, to be included in jazz. So Latin music and especially music coming out of Cuba.
Okay.
Back in the 1930s and the 1920s, it was a perfect combination with jazz. So that's why, you know, you begin to have, like in the 1930s, 1940s, this whole movement, which was called Cubop.
Cubop.
You know, the whole bebop, because you had different styles. So you had bebop, and the cubop is actually something that got started with people like Mario Bauza and the Machito Orchestra. And then, you know, also Dizzy Gillespie and Chano Pozo, which is an interesting story there, because you had an individual percussion, and this is when the conga drums gets introduced into the whole genre of jazz.
Right.
You had people like Chano Pozo, who didn't speak English, and you had people like Dizzy Gillespie, who didn't speak Spanish, but they came together and they were able to understand each other through the music. And they came out, you know, one of the great musical pieces that was actually composed and recorded by Dizzy and Chano was this tune called Manteca, which is a classic song.
Let's take some look at some of the pictures you brought in, and you could talk about them and tell us about these figures and how you've connected to them, and how you have made them a part of your life and part of educating people on Latin jazz.
Okay. This is the Candido Cameron. He actually is like one of the oldest. He's like, I think, 92 years old, and he still performs. He actually performed.
92, wow.
But he performed when he was 90 at 2 years ago at our Latin Jazz Festival. He came in with Jane Burnett and Eladio Duran.
Wow.
And he's the guy that recorded and performed with everybody. This is the late Ray Barreto. This is in 1980 in Humboldt Park.
Wow.
At a festival where he actually was performing with his band. And Ray also played with a lot of different African American jazz musicians back in the 50s and recorded. And he actually became a very popular figure in the Fania family, which is family is a recording label.
Right.
This
and
is
there you are.
There I am with the great Tito Puente, and also Mr. Victor Parra, who actually has a program on one of the local jazz stations, WDCB, called Mambo Express. Victor has been around. He was a good friend of Victor Venegas, by the way, too. Victor has been around kicking in town since like the 1950s, playing music. And this is the guy that I alluded to a little while ago, who actually was one of the first guys that actually really got this thing going. It was Mario Bauza. And Mario with Machito formed the Machito Orchestra, and they call it the Afro, I think it was the Afro Jazz Band, or the Latin Afro Jazz Band. This is Candido again with Tony Bennett. Like I said, Candido played with and performed with everybody out here.
Right. So obviously the influence and the connection to performers of, you know, jazz and other genres is pretty deep.
This is at the Jazz and Clave Jazz Festival at the Rat House in 2005, 2006. And this is Bobby Sanabria performing. Now, Bobby came the same year, I think in 2012, with this Cuarteto H. And Bobby is a professor in New York, and he has a great Latin jazz band, and it's very well respected. This is from 1980, one of the first Chicago Fests. I don't know if you remember the Chicago Fest that was held at Navy Pier.
A little boy.
And this is Mongo Santa Maria. Mongo Santa Maria is also a legendary figure in the whole movement of Latin jazz percussionist. He's in the middle. And the gentleman with the T-shirt is Juan Montenegro, who used to have a program called Latin Explosion on La Tremenda way back in the days in the 1970s. And that's me with the hat and a beard and hair.
And hair.
Right.
Wow. So this has obviously been part of your life. What is, you're saying the festival has grown and is growing. What is your hope going forward with the Latin Jazz
I don't
Festival?
know. You know, again, this is kind of like the initial stage, and it's taken us 9 years to be where we're at. You know, I would love to make this. I mean, right now I think it's great the way it is, but you know, we could actually, you know, I think that as the word gets around, because people are always asking me, you know, what's going to be happening next? When is the Latin Jazz Festival, and who are you going to be bringing? And you know, this year we got a great surprise for the people we're going to be bringing. We're putting together a group of great musicians that are going to be performing.
So the lineup is final already, or are you still?
We're still working on it, but we kind of have finalized almost like 95% of it.
Oh, wow.
And again, we're going to be having some surprises when people find out who are some of the top acts that we're bringing. They're going to be coming down, and it's kind of interesting because we do this in the park, and people not only from that community come out, but people from all over the city come out, and they actually come out and they enjoy themselves. They bring their families, their kids. You see little kids playing, running around the place, and you know. And again, this year we're actually experimenting and actually looking at some connection between the blues, jazz, and Latin jazz. We're going to be actually commissioning probably one of the local guys to come together with some blues musicians and jazz and Latin jazz musicians to put together a show, just to show the connection, because it's basically also an educational process of educating people about this whole musical genre.
And so educating obviously takes place through the performances. Is there anything else that you kind of expand or take from?
Well,
the
we haven't
Festival?
gone there. It would be ideal if we could actually get these. You know, again, it's all based on funding, but the Jazz Institute Chicago does a good job in terms of promoting these programs through schools and through various programs throughout the years. So it would be ideal if when these guys come in, they would also give workshops to kids. But what happens is that when we do this in the summer, school is out, so it's kind of hard to bring kids together and do this. But again, this is a collaboration between the Jazz Institute of Chicago, the Chicago Park District, and also the Department of Cultural Affairs in the city of Chicago. Because what we do with this festival is that we actually are promoting the big jazz festival, which is at the Labor Day weekend at Millennium Park in Chicago.
And kind of just be a little bump in the middle of the summer for that.
Exactly.
Okay, let's take a look. We have another piece of music that we want to show our audience. Tell us about that this piece. Violinist, I believe, is.
Oh yes, I believe that this is Jane Sanders, and it's called Proyecto Libre, if I'm not mistaken. But this is an interesting concept. Once again, we have some great musicians in town. It's the one thing that back in the days when musicians would come in from out of town, and they would come in and be backed up by local musicians. The problem was, and this is I'm talking in the Latino musical environment. A lot of musicians did not read. They were not that educated, and they didn't read. So if you sent a music sheet, you really couldn't read the music. So basically nowadays we have some educated, great musicians that could actually read and do great jobs. And so we have musicians. Yeah,
let's take a look at that.
Okay.
Because we're just running a little short on time.
Okay.
Oh, thanks for bringing that in. It's another great performance from last summer's festival. Again, we're getting close to the end of the show. Uh, Give us the dates again and the location and
July 17th and the 8th, July 17th, which is a Friday, and July 18th on a Saturday. We do afternoon activities for
what
families.
time do those start?
They start around 12, 1 o'clock,
Okay.
and then the program on Friday night starts at 7, and it
Okay.
goes from 7 to 8, 8 to 9, and you know we have 3 bands, and they each play like 50 minutes, an hour.
Okay.
And then Saturday we have an afternoon program, which actually goes till about 4 or 5, and then at 6 o'clock we start the music.
And that goes till
It goes till about 9 because it's like 3 bands
okay.
at 50 minutes. For each 50 minutes to an hour.
Okay, great. Well, we are out of time, but thank you so much for coming out today and sharing this with us, and thanks for everything you've been doing for Latin jazz in our city.
Well, hopefully we'd like to invite everyone out, and again, it's a great venue. It's a great way to spend a summer day in Chicago.
Thanks. And to you, thank you for joining us. Perspectivas Latinas is a community service of CAN TV. If your nonprofit organization would like to work with CAN TV, call 312-738-1400 and ask for nonprofit services. Tune in to Perspectivas Latinas for local issues and concerns every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. on CAN TV 21. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. Thank you for joining us.